My brother walked into my law firm on a Tuesday afternoon and didn't recognize me. He sat in the waiting area for 20 minutes, right beneath the framed photo of me that hangs above the reception desk, the one where I'm shaking hands with the managing partner on my first day as a named partner, and he still didn't recognize me. He was too busy scrolling on his phone, probably rehearsing whatever pitch he was about to deliver. My receptionist, a sharp young woman named Danny, came to my office and said there was a walk-in. A man named Derek who claimed he had an urgent business matter and insisted on speaking with whoever was in charge. I told her to send him to conference room B. I want to tell you what happened in that room. But first, I need to tell you what happened 7 years ago, because none of this makes sense without that part. I was 24 years old when my brother told me I had 30 days to get out of the house. Not my parents, my brother. Derek was 31 at the time, recently married to his wife Cassandra, and they had decided that the family home, the house my grandmother had left to all of us, should become theirs alone. He sat me down at the kitchen table one evening with Cassandra beside him and slid a piece of paper across to me. It was a buyout offer. A number so low it was almost funny. He said Cassandra was pregnant and they needed the space, and that since I wasn't contributing meaningfully to the household, the fair thing was for me to take the money and start fresh somewhere. I asked where our mother was during this conversation. She was upstairs. Derek had apparently spoken to her beforehand. She came down later that night and sat on the edge of my bed and said that Derek was the one with a family now, a real family, and that I was young and capable and would land on my feet. She said it as if she was complimenting me, as if telling me to leave was an act of faith in my potential. I want to be clear about something. I was not unemployed. I was not a burden. I was working 2 jobs, one as a paralegal during the day and one at a restaurant 3 nights a week while studying for the LSAT on weekends. I was paying a reduced rent to my mother, every single month, on time. I had lived in that house my entire life. My grandmother had bounced me on her knee in the living room of that house. And in the span of one evening, I was being told it no longer had room for me. I didn't fight it. I know some people would have. I know some people would have called a lawyer. The irony of that is not lost on me now, and argued their rights and made it ugly. But I looked at my brother across that kitchen table, and I made a decision. I would not give him the satisfaction of watching me beg. I would take the money, which was barely enough for a deposit and 2 months of rent, and I would not look back. I signed the paper. I moved out in 3 weeks, not 30 days. I wanted to be gone before I changed my mind. The apartment I rented was small enough that I could touch both walls of the bathroom if I stretched my arms out. I ate a lot of rice and canned beans that first year. I turned down the heat in winter and wore 2 pairs of socks. I studied for the LSAT at a folding table next to the window because the overhead light flickered and gave me headaches. I took the test, got a score I was proud of, applied to law school, and got in. I worked all 3 years of law school. I graduated. I passed the bar on my first attempt. I am telling you the boring parts on purpose. I want you to understand that my success did not happen like a movie montage. It was slow and unglamorous, and there were nights when I lay on that thin mattress and wondered if I had made a terrible mistake by not fighting harder for what was mine. But every time I thought that, I remembered my brother's face across that kitchen table, so certain, so comfortable, and something in me went quiet and steady. I decided a long time ago that the best answer I could give him was one he would never hear me say out loud. I joined a small litigation firm right out of law school. I was good at the work. I was better than good. Somewhere in the years of being underestimated and overlooked, I had developed a very precise understanding of what it felt like to have power used against you, and that made me a formidable advocate for people in similar positions. I made partner in 6 years. Last year, my name went on the door. My mother called once, about 2 years after I left. She said she missed me. I told her I was busy. She called again at Christmas, and I let it go to voicemail. Not out of cruelty, I want to be honest about my motives, but because I had learned that some relationships cost more than they give, and I had spent enough of my reserves. Derek never called. I built a life that was entirely my own. a condo I own, a firm whose name includes mine, a team of associates who are sharp and loyal, and whom I work hard to treat well. Friendships that I chose, not inherited. It was a quieter life than the one I grew up imagining, but it was solid. It was mine. And then Derek walked into my waiting room. I sat in conference room B and waited. I had poured myself a glass of water and placed a legal pad on the table in front of me, out of habit. When the door opened and he walked in, I watched his face do something I had imagined many times but had never seen in person. His eyes found me, registered a woman sitting at the head of the table, moved past me toward the empty chairs, as if looking for someone else, and then snapped back. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. "Maya," he said. "Derek," I said. "Please sit down." He sat. He looked around the room the way people do when they are trying to orient themselves. His eyes went to the nameplate on the conference room wall, which reads Hayes and Cole, LLP, my last name first. He looked at my suit, which was not the kind of suit a paralegal wears. He looked at the door, as if calculating the distance. He started. "I'm the managing partner," I said. "Danny mentioned you have an urgent business matter. I have about 40 minutes. What can I help you with?" I want you to understand the discipline it took to say that. Not the anger, the discipline, because he was my brother, and I had not seen him in 7 years, and there was a part of me, some stubborn residue of childhood, that registered his face, and felt something. Not warmth, exactly, more like the ghost of warmth. The memory of what warmth with him had once been possible of feeling. But I was also a lawyer, and I had learned that the person who controls the framing controls the room. So I kept my voice professional, and my hands still, and I let him absorb the situation at whatever pace he needed. He absorbed it slowly. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know you were. I found this firm online. Someone referred me. I didn't know your name was." "Hayes was Grandma's maiden name," I said. "I changed it after law school." That landed. I watched it land. He knew, the same as I did, that our grandmother had loved me. That she had sat with me in the living room of that house and taught me to play cards and called me her smart one. He knew what it meant that I had taken her name. He cleared his throat. "I need legal help," he said. "It's serious." I said nothing. I waited. He and Cassandra, he explained, had started a home renovation business 4 years ago. It had grown quickly, maybe too quickly. They had taken on a large commercial contract, a property developer, substantial scope, substantial money, and somewhere in the execution they had run into problems, cost overruns, delays, disputes about the contract terms. The developer was now threatening to sue for breach, and the number they were looking at was significant enough to potentially wipe out everything he and Cassandra had built. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. I looked at the contract, the correspondence, the demand letter from the opposing party's attorneys. I recognized the opposing party's firm. It was a firm I had worked against twice before. They were aggressive and well-resourced, and they did not bluff. Derek watched me read. When I looked up, he said, "Can you help us?" I set the folder down. I folded my hands on the table. And I said, "I need to ask you something first." He nodded. "Do you understand what it means that you're sitting here asking me this?" A long pause. Outside, I could hear the faint sound of the office, phones and keyboards, and the low hum of the air system. Derek looked at the table. "I know I wasn't." He stopped. "I know things didn't end well. You told me I had 30 days to leave the home my grandmother left us both," I said. "You had your wife sit next to you while you slid a lowball offer across the table and called it fair. Our mother came to my room afterward and told me to look at it as an opportunity." I kept my voice level. I was not performing calm. I actually was calm, which surprised me less than it once might have. "I haven't spoken to you in 7 years. I haven't spoken to our mother in almost that long. And you walked into my firm because someone referred you, without knowing it was mine, and now you're asking me to protect everything you built after you made me leave." Derek's jaw tightened. Then it released. Something moved across his face that I had not expected to see there. Something that looked, if I'm being honest, like shame. I know, he said quietly. I know what I did. I looked at him for a long moment. I am not going to tell you that he apologized eloquently. He didn't. He said something halting and insufficient about being young and scared about the baby, and listening to Cassandra more than he should have, and not thinking through what he was asking me to give up. It was not a good apology. It was the apology of someone who had not rehearsed it because he had not expected to need it today, in this room, like this. But it was real. I've spent enough time across from people in high-pressure moments to know when someone is performing and when they aren't. Derek was not performing. He was a man sitting in his younger sister's conference room, 7 years too late, saying something true in a clumsy way. I did not forgive him in that moment. Forgiveness is not a switch. But I listened. After he finished, I was quiet for a moment. Then I opened the folder again and looked at the contract more carefully. I asked him 3 specific questions about the timeline of the delays and whether they had documentation of the supply chain issues they'd encountered. He answered them. His answers were actually helpful. He had paperwork, he had emails, he had a record of trying to communicate problems to the developer before the relationship deteriorated. It wasn't a hopeless case. It wasn't a good one, but it wasn't hopeless. I'm going to be honest with you, I said. Professionally honest, separate from everything else. He nodded. The demand letter is aggressive, but it has weaknesses. The contract language around delay penalties is ambiguous in a way that a good litigator could work with. You have documentation of good faith communication. That matters. The number they're threatening is the ceiling, not the floor they're posturing. He exhaled. However, I said, this case would require significant resources and time. We would need to conduct a full review of every document, every communication, and the contract itself. We would need to potentially retain a construction expert. This is not inexpensive. Derek nodded slowly. Whatever it costs, he said. We've been saving. Cassandra and we can't lose the business. We have employees. 3 kids now. 3 kids. I hadn't known that. I thought about that for a second. 3 nieces or nephews I had never met. Growing up in the house where I grew up. In rooms I knew. I'm not going to take your case, I said. He went still. Not because of what happened between us, I said immediately, so he would understand, because it's a conflict. Not a legal conflict, a personal one. I am not able to be your attorney and also be your sister, and right now I think you need both of those things handled separately and by different people. I reached into the folder and removed the demand letter and looked at the opposing firm's name again. I'm going to refer you to a colleague of mine. Her name is Patricia. She is a better construction litigator than I am. I'm primarily a civil litigator, and she will take care of you. I'll call her today. Derek stared at me. You'd do that? I'd do that, I said, professionally, because it's the right referral. And I paused, because the next part was harder to say. Because you're my brother. And despite everything, that still means something to me. I don't know what yet. But something. He put his hand over his eyes for a moment. I looked at the legal pad in front of me and gave him a second. When he lowered his hand, his eyes were red. I'm sorry, Maya, he said. I know that doesn't fix it, but I am. I know, I said. I called Patricia from my office while Derek waited. She agreed to take the consultation that week. I walked back to the conference room and gave Derek her card and all the notes I'd taken. I told him what documentation to bring and what questions to ask. He took the card and held it carefully, as if he was afraid of creasing it. At the door of the conference room, he stopped. Mom asks about you, he said. She doesn't say it to me directly, but I can tell. She keeps your law school graduation photo on the mantle, the one from the newspaper announcement. I didn't say anything for a moment. The house I grew up in, the mantle I knew, my photo on it. Tell her I'm well, I said finally. That's all for now. Tell her I'm well. He nodded. He left. I stood in conference room B for a while after he was gone. The folder was still on the table. I picked it up, walked to my office, and set it next to the window that looks out over the street below. It was a cold afternoon and the people on the sidewalk were moving fast, collars up, heads down. I thought about the folding table I used to study at in my first apartment, the way the light came through that single window in winter. I thought about my grandmother's hands, shuffling cards. I thought about the person I had been at 24, signing a piece of paper at a kitchen table, choosing not to beg. I thought about what that person would think if she could see this office, this window, her name on the door down the hall. I think she would feel that the 30 days were worth it. Not because being pushed out was fair, it was not. Not because the people who did it deserved forgiveness. I'm still working on that. But because the version of me that was built in the years afterward, in that cold apartment with 2 pairs of socks and a flickering overhead light, is a version I would not trade. My phone buzzed. Danny, reminding me of a 3 o'clock. I straightened my jacket, picked up my legal pad, and walked out of the office toward the next thing. The door with my name on it caught the light as I passed. I didn't stop to look at it. I didn't need to. I already knew it was there.